before history was carved in stone. Banbian and Mekhin's world was written with the bones and blood of those who fell from the sky. The beings who once carried the light chose to step into darkness. And it was their sins that shaped the destiny of mankind. This is a story of rebellion, of giant creatures born from the sins of fallen angels, and of a world destroyed by their own hands. There was an age shrouded in the mists of mystery, an age before nowhere darkness still whispered of creation. In that lost memory, darkness covered the earth, silent, heavy, and unshakable. In heaven, the sons of God, the angels who guard mankind, looked down on the earth. There they saw the daughters of men, their beauty shining like something forbidden. A tiny spark of thought crept into their minds and caught fire. Curiosity turned to desire, desire turned to rebellion. And in that moment, the sky split. Eternity shook, and the world entered a chaos no one would ever forget.
Hold the line until the signal. Do not break formation.
Giants walked the earth, and their cities were built of iron and blood. The echoes of that sin spread through the generations, like a curse that never died. Everything we know today was born from the darkness of those who once dared to challenge the heavens. Under a sky heavy with fate, Shemjaza, leader of the fallen angels, gathered 200 brothers on the snow-capped peak of Mount Hermon. The cold wind cut into the flesh, but the weight of that moment made everything else meaningless. Time seemed to stand still, waiting for the oath to be etched into eternity. Shemjaza spoke, his voice resonating through the wind and frost, firm and resolute.
If a price must be paid for what we have done, then let it fall on me first.
A heavy silence followed, broken by the words of another angel.
No, we swore to walk this path. What we have done cannot be undone.
With a determined look, Shemjaza concluded.
So be it. Our fate is sealed, and the fall is beyond escape.
They swore an oath that changed the nature of their souls and bound them forever. The covenant was sealed into eternity by the power of an unbreakable promise. From that moment on, the path of return was gone. They pledged not only to sin, but also to the punishment that awaited at the end of the road. And so they fell not with the gentleness of angelic wings, but with the fierce fury of an irretrievable fall. They plunged like blazing stars, tearing the sky apart, leaving behind them long, scarred streaks of light on the night sky. When their feet touched the ground, the world seemed to shudder, for the earth itself felt the weight of their sins. Their bodies burned with a strange and terrible light, the light of rebellion, of power tainted. In that moment, the universe fell silent, as if all creation had stopped breathing to witness the fall of those who had once been called the sons of heaven. The mortals stood still, petrified with terror and fear. Before them were giant figures, powerful beyond all understanding, beings no longer of this world. No one spoke, only trembling and silence reigned. The air grew heavy, as if the sky itself were bending down to witness something forbidden. Then Shemjaza's voice rang out deep, dark, filled with power and challenge. He looked at his fallen brothers, at the trembling humanity, and spoke as one who had lost the light but had never yielded.
What's done cannot be undone. We are the fallen, and from this moment on, everything changes.
With fiery natures and powers beyond humankind, the fallen angels fused with the daughters of mortals. And from them, their children were born, but they were no ordinary children. An ancient hunger burned in their eyes, a thirst for power and strength that shook the order of creation. They grew up belonging to neither heaven nor earth, carrying in their veins a bloodline that was a mixture of betrayed light and rising darkness. They grew into giants, so tall that they blocked out the sun. They were called Nephilim, giants, descendants of a cursed covenant, bearing a predetermined fate, not only for themselves, but for the world they trampled upon. Before them lay the inevitable weight of their fall, The world would never be the same from that moment on. Their presence spread like a living nightmare, casting a shadow over the tribes of men. The offspring of fallen angels and mortal women possessed power and cunning beyond human limits. They became kings and tyrants, worshipped as gods by some but endless terrors by all. At first, their hunger seemed harmless. They ate every living thing and fruit the earth gave them, without any regard for it. But then their greed grew, beyond the limits of nature. Nothing could satisfy them anymore. Their eyes turned to humanity. The hunt began fierce, brutal, and inescapable. The world groaned in pain, and the earth, stained with blood and sin, began to give birth to monstrosities, twisted creatures, horrors that never deserved to be born. Every cry, every tear that falls from the human race is like watering the soil with the seeds of depravity. Corruption and sin spread like a deadly plague, corroding all life and polluting the very soul of the world. And the Watchers, once celestial beings of glory, now witnesses and architects of chaos, shared with men forbidden secrets, which must be kept hidden in the heavens. Among them, Azazel, prince of the fallen, taught men to forge iron and bronze, to create sharp swords and sturdy shields, the first instruments of war, which would paint the history of human kingdoms with blood. Others brought dark arts to mankind, evil astrology, magic, and spells that twisted the soul, bending the will of the weak. Humanity, intoxicated by forbidden knowledge, fell deep into the abyss of depravity. Violence was no longer a sin or a punishment. It became a celebration, a pleasure for souls that had lost their light. Now chaos has become the law of the world. Even nature weeps under the weight of human sin. The sky is dark, obscuring the sun, as if even light has turned away from this fall. And then the earth began to groan, as if the very soul of creation were suffering from an ancient disease, as old as the first mountains. The rot spread insidiously, from the heart of life to the deepest roots of the world. An age of darkness was born, where the divine and the mortal collided. And in that brief moment, humanity tasted a horror it would never forget. In the depths of corruption, as human hope faded like a candle in a storm, a divine sign appeared. From the chaos, a voice rang out strong and unmistakable, carrying the weight of an ancient promise, awakening what seemed forever buried. God, in his infinite wisdom and justice, sent a chosen man into the world. Not an ordinary man, but one chosen from among many. A man who had walked with the Creator, fearless, without doubt, with a pure heart and unwavering faith. His name was Enoch. In a land ravaged by corruption and the brutal hand of the Nephilim, where the darkness of oppression lay as still as the eternal night, Enoch's voice rang out like a thunderclap in the silent desert, tearing the silence of despair. He did not tremble before the giants who ruled the world, nor bow to the fallen angels who corrupted creation with their power. In him the light of the Creator still burned, unquenchable by the darkness of the world. He knew clearly that the Almighty was the one who was guiding his every step. With that firm belief, he raised his voice to preach, spreading the sacred message everywhere, like a flame lighting up the darkness of the human world.
Behold, the sky opens, and the judgment of the High Ones is at hand.
The words of Enoch rang out like prophetic words etched in fire, reverberating over the mountains and echoing in the vast desert. But only a few souls listened, those who still had the light in their hearts, while the majority of humanity turned away, obscured by the darkness of pride and sin. The world laughed at him. The crowd jeered at the old prophet, blind to the gathering storm of judgment as the endless darkness swallowed the last light. But God's judgment had begun. The Nephilim giants continued to reign in arrogance, raising impregnable towers that stood as monuments to their own sins. Their laws written in blood and violence were enforced with a ruthless hand. And humanity, lost in the chaos, imitated the cruelty of the one who had cast them into the abyss. Amid the ashes of the cities destroyed by the Nephilim, Enoch walked, carrying in his heart the pain of a world that had forgotten its creator. He recounted the visions, burning fierce images in his mind of a future consumed by the fires of judgment. A time when all creation would be consumed, and the destruction would be total, irreparable, and no one would be able to escape.
I have seen the end. The mountains will melt like wax. The stars will fall from the sky, and the armies of the Lord will descend in fire and vengeance.
When these prophecies reached the ears of the fallen angels, who had once considered themselves invulnerable,
They're coming for me. The light, it's fading because of what I've done. Forgive me, please forgive me.
a strange emotion filled them, fear. For the first time since their expulsion from heaven, they trembled. Those who had fallen because of pride now bowed before Enoch, whose once brilliant light was now darkened. For he foresaw the coming wrath, and none, angel or man, could escape it.
Prophet, intercede for us. Take our petition to the Creator. We beseech his mercy.
Enoch, burdened with the burden of a divine messenger, offered his last pleas for forgiveness to the throne of the Most High. But the time for mercy had passed, the judgment had been rendered, and the scales of justice now tipped decisively toward the judgment of the fallen angels. When Enoch returned, his face was a mask of deep sorrow and evidence that the fate of the rebels was sealed. There was no escape. He looked at them, the once radiant angels, now in despair and darkness, knowing that grace had been withdrawn from them forever.
There will be no peace for you. Your children, the giants, will be destroyed before your eyes. And you will be forced to witness the downfall of all that you have created.
The words rang out like a thunderclap, tearing the silence that enveloped them. The sacred weight of the pronouncement echoed throughout the land. The very sky seemed to be preparing to execute a sentence that had been decreed since time immemorial. In the vast lands where the giants ruled, their figures stood like proud gods. They walked among the people with the arrogance of those who thought themselves immortal. Blinded by power and complacency, they did not hear the whispers of approaching death. Their hearts had turned to stone from violence and destruction. Even the concept of fate had become foreign, as something never to be reached. But time, like a relentless river, cold and unforgiving, was bringing them closer to their unknowing end. On the horizon, a dark omen loomed, signaling the coming change. As the world sank into the darkness of decay, a faint light began to flicker from a place that seemed forgotten. From within the darkness, a new figure emerged, a simple man whose soul had been hardened by trials and pain. He had neither fame nor power, but within him existed something nobler than all: purity of heart, a small torch left in the long night of humanity. His calloused hands bore the marks of labor and years of humble living. His name was Noah. He was not a hero cloaked in glory, but a simple man. His soul shone like a beacon in the darkness. When the world around him was rotting with sin, his eyes still shone with hope. His gaze was turned toward heaven, where God's light still shone. Even when the earth was swallowed by devastation, he did not lose faith. He was the last flame of justice in a generation that had lost its way. A generation that was drowning in evil, greed, and violence. Then one night, as the wind blew, carrying the weight of the world, something extraordinary happened. From above, a brilliant light descended, not to consume, but to light with an unquenchable flame. It was the presence of the divine, a pure power that encompassed all things, and Noah's soul trembled with wonder, but also with a supernatural peace. The air around him became dense, as if it were vibrating with an irresistible force. Noah, filled with holy fear, did not hesitate. There was no room for doubt. He saw clearly the path he had to take. With steady hands and a determined heart, he began the work of building the ark. The rhythmic tapping of the hammer on wood was the only sound in a world that was slowly sinking into chaos. The rhythm was lonely, but it held a profound meaning. Each hammer blow was a response to the sin and fall of humanity. People gathered around him, mocking looks and mocking laughter.
Look at the old man! He builds a ship on dry land! Has the sun fried his head? Where is this flood he speaks of?
But Noah did not respond. His answer lay in the hewn planks of wood, in the ark that slowly took shape in the dry land. He was unmoved, for he knew he was on a mission greater than himself. It was a plan from the Most High. As Noah continued his work, the heavens began to move in the glorious power of heaven. The archangels received the command from above. Their wings spread wide, shining as they descended to earth. Raphael, the celestial warrior, was sent to capture Azal. Azal was the leader of the rebellion that had corrupted all life on earth. In a cave deep within the mountains, Raphael found him. He was a creature covered in wild power and destruction. Under the flames of divine justice, Raphael used the chains of soul fire to bind the proud rebel. He was thrown into the abyss of eternal darkness, where light would never reach. There, the screams of sin echoed forever, until the end of the world. At the same time, Gabriel, the messenger of the Supreme, was given a different mission. He did not fight with swords and spears, but with whispers that sound doubt. Gabriel infiltrated the giant clans, stirring up jealousy, hatred, and the desire for power. The once loyal allies began to doubt each other. The eternal oaths turned to ashes. And then, the final great war of the giant race broke out. It was a massacre without a winner, leaving only the roar of destruction and the darkness that swallowed all glory. Noah, hang habit hu hanged in Rotrong Siwai Trui, Bunling Al Lam Viek. Each hammer blow, each plank of wood sounded like the heartbeat of faith. He understood that the ark was not just a construction, but a sacred covenant, a silent promise between man and the Creator. It was a promise of survival, that in the midst of chaos and sin, there was still a glimmer of hope that had not yet died. A chance to save what remained pure, to preserve life, faith, and light in the darkness that was about to engulf the world. And as the world around him fell apart, Noah continued to hammer one nail after another, like a final echo of justice echoing in the agony of humanity. Then the Supreme Being spoke for the last time.
Get into the ship, you and all your household.
And they obeyed, without hesitation. From the sky high above, flocks of birds swooped down with powerful wings. They tore through the air like living arrows, landing in pairs before the giant ship. From the fields and deep forests, whole herds of creatures moved like a river of flesh and bone. They were guided by an invisible command that only their souls could hear. From the dry desert, reptiles slithered through the dust, also heading for the same destination. It was the call of the Creator. Even the wild beasts, lions, bears, elephants, and creatures that had never known peace walked side by side. They acted as if all creation were bowing before a divine command. On the seventh day, Noah and his family entered the ark. The huge door, too heavy for human hands, was closed by God Himself. The silence was heavy and terrifying, like the breath of the universe before its wrath. The sky changed. Lightning tore the sky like fiery swords tearing through space. The earth groaned, and a roar rose as if 1,000 storms had burst together. The abysses split open. The earth erupted with rivers of fire and mud. The doors of the sky opened wide. Waters poured down like a wall of death, covering the entire world. The world was plunged into terror and despair. People fled in panic, crying for salvation amid the wrath of heaven and earth. Nephilim, the proud giants, sons of the fallen, climbed the highest peaks, believing that their strength and height could defy fate. Among them, a great giant who might have been Gilgamesh himself, raised his head to defy the storm. The sky answered with no words. Only thunder rumbled and lightning tore through the sky, while the raging waters rose, crushing everything in their path. The once solid mountains were reduced to fragile islands, sinking beneath the raging flood. A gigantic tornado rose, swallowing the giants with a roar of despair and defiance. Their cries mingled with the cries of men, becoming a single chorus of terror, swallowed completely by the rising tide that flooded the world. For 40 days and 40 nights, the world was utterly destroyed. Not a single living thing survived. No human voice was heard. Creation was cleansed by the tears of divine judgment. When the roar of the flood subsided, only the sound of water covered the earth. And there, in the middle of the endless ocean, a small, solitary wooden ship still floated. It carried within it the promise of survival. The end had come, but also the beginning of something new. The waters of judgment began to recede. The sea swallowed up cities and mountains, and gradually returned the earth to its form. Noah's Ark, built of faith and obedience, landed gently on the mountain of Ararat. Silence fell, a sacred silence, as if all creation held its breath, waiting the moment of rebirth. Then a creaking sound was heard, the door opened, and the first light of the new world shone forth. Noah and his family stepped off the ark. His feet, accustomed to the planks and the sound of the waves, now touched solid ground for the first time since the flood. Fresh air blew, carrying the scent of new life. Noah looked around. No empire, no city, no thrones of kings. Only rocks, young trees, and a vast horizon filled with light. There, he built an altar of gold, not of precious stones or marble, but of rough stones, picked from the damp earth. A fire was lit. Smoke rose high. Tea was not just ashes, but an invisible prayer, a word of thanks carved into the wind, sent up to the blue sky. And then, the sky opened. A glorious light stretched across the sky, the world's first rainbow. Not just light and rain, but the Creator's signature, a covenant, a promise. The voice of God echoes in eternity. Never again will the waters destroy all life. It is a covenant of mercy, a sign of hope and a new beginning for humanity.